Welcome to this week's Compass Ecosystem podcast. My name is Carolyn Gorst. I am the Director of Development here at Compass Affordable Housing, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my fabulous co-host, Lydia Randa.
Good morning, Carolyn. It's so nice to be here again for another podcast episode.
So great to have you. This week, we're really excited. Lydia, I'm so excited to have RK Kelly joining us. Hi, RK.
Hi, good morning.
So good to see your smiling face.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, for those of you turning in, the purpose of the Compass Ecosystem podcast is to inform, engage, and to connect the Southern Arizona community in dialogue about its human development ecosystem. And this week, our special guest, RK Kelly, is here. And RK, you've had quite the journey and on your career path. And I'd like for you to tell our guests a little bit about the work that you've done, both current and past, the audiences you've worked with, the issues you've addressed, the services provided. I know this is a loaded question, and the outcomes that you have seen.
Well, I I moved here to Tucson, Arizona, 31 years ago. I always know exactly how many years it is because I moved here from Berkeley, California, with a 6-month-old baby who is now 31, my
Wow.
oldest, Amelia. And so, pretty quickly, because of my experience in San Francisco Bay Area, I worked there in theater and in journalism and in advertising. So, um, when I moved here, I had introductions to some people here, particularly at what was then known as the Tucson Pima Arts Council. So I got involved with them pretty quickly. Um, and I started writing grants for arts organizations pretty quickly when I got here in 94, 95. So then that led to some because of my journalism background, my theater background, writing. I also had done some teaching of writing up in the Bay Area. The Tucson Pima Arts Council asked me to run after school programs, summer programs for teenagers, teaching them how to write personal essays about where they lived, their neighborhoods. And that was so successful. The very first booklet that we did, looking into the West Side, became infamously the most stolen publication
Oh,
at the Tucson High Library. So Tucson High actually contacted the Tucson Pima Arts Council and said, "You're doing something right because everybody wants this book," which was titled "Looking into the West Side," um, and that was a 1997 summer program. So the Tucson Pima Arts Council, my mentor there, Albert Soto, uh, was the champion to say, "Hey, this should be a nonprofit." So by 1998, we had a 501(c)(3). The name of that nonprofit was Voices. The long title was Voices Community Stories Past and Present. And our our probably our most famous project, or the one that a lot of people know, is the mural project on Broadway where all those people are walking at you. And so we worked with teenagers throughout the downtown neighborhoods, in Barrio Viejo, in El Presidio, uh, some of the West Side neighborhoods, South Park, and we did all sorts of events and outreach to ask people, please give us your photographs, because it used to be in the 40s and 50s and 30s, people did not have cameras. It was the pre-Kodak generation. And so people would literally take your photo on the street. And It was very, very amazing. We had over 300 photos donated. And anyway, and we did a book called Snapped on the Street, and that sold thousands of copies in the first year. And that was the seed money for Voices. Um, and we went on to do an oral history project of the Connie Chambers public housing, which then extended to Tucson's very first public housing, La Reforma, which was just across the street there at 10th Avenue and 22nd Street. And we just went on to do a lot of projects like that. So that's I was the founding director of Voices. I was with Voices for 10 years. And I went on to uh, I wanted to kind of reflect on my experience, and I went to the U of A and got a master's in rhetoric and focused on the history of grant writing, especially kind of contextualized within the 1960s, the war on poverty, and particularly on the community action programs of that very famous legislation. And then, I decided to go back out into the community. I missed the community and doing work, on the ground, and I got hired by Pima County. And I worked for what was then, uh, it 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 was called, it was basically the community development, department, which is now part of, the community and workforce development, department at Pima County. Um, and pretty quickly there, I was asked to write beyond my department and collaborate with other departments throughout Pima County, and then that kind of morphed in a lot of different ways with a lot of different players into what became the Pima County Department of Grants Management and Innovation, uh, which was the first department of its kind in Pima County to oversee all of the grants and grants life cycle um, of of the second biggest local government in the state of Arizona, Pima County. So that was pretty exciting. I retired from there last year, and I started a consultancy so I could get back into community work and my first love working with nonprofits here in Tucson.
Wow. I think that is quite the journey uh, and experience that you're bringing back to our community. Uh, Before we go to break, Lydia, is there anything you wanted to bring in?
Well, first of all, I want to commend you on your wonderful career path. And what really speaks to me in everything, couple things in everything that you said, the Voices Project in particular, I found it interesting that it was called Voices, but it really incorporated visual arts as a voice, so to speak, as a communication tool. And I find that in Southern Arizona, in Tucson in particular, certainly in all communities, but Tucson in particular has a great attention to um, connecting art with expression of community strength and community needs. And it sounds
Mm.
to me like your target audience really is a wide spectrum that brings together so many services and then leads to great outcomes. Good for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that, a lot of that emphasis on the visual storytelling, I would really there were 3 people at the Tucson Pima Arts Council who I think were really leaders and visionaries for that, and that's Albert Soto, who I already mentioned, also Lorraine Hernandez and Annabelle Nunez. They were really, the 3 pillars in my mind at the Tucson Pima Arts Council who were really the champions for community storytelling and making sure that the stories were not just, written, but also visual in all the different ways, um, that the visual art forms can take place.
A great part of building an ecosystem and
Yes,
strengthening it.
yes, absolutely.
It's important that Tucson Electric Power partner with agencies like Compass Affordable Housing to ensure the members of our community have access to the resources that they need. We understand that we're operating in an affordability crisis, and this is not something that can be solved alone. Together, we can achieve so much more.
And we are back. This podcast segment sponsor is brought to you by Pima County Short Term Crisis Emergency Resources Grant. RK, thank you so much for your conversation about the background and the audience's services and outcomes that you focus on. I wonder if you might tell our listeners and viewers a little more about now how, in your work, your agency with other agencies, so to speak, how that starts to solve specific issues that we see prevalent here in Southern Arizona.
Yeah, so the consultancy that I founded last year is called Grants Arc. Um, and I think of story arcs, right? Beginning, middle, end. And I also think of arcs create circles. And I was brought up very Irish Catholic, and in Catholicism, when you're 13, you name yourself. And I named myself after, you'll be very surprised, after Joan of Arc. So, so Arc is
Very
close to
apropos.
me. So Grant's Arc. Um, so I uh, I think of Grant's Arc as acting in the community, the across that cycle of the program cycle or the grants life cycle. They mirror each other. And that is, pre-award, you are designing the program. It is really important to me during that part of the arc that you are paying really good attention to the most attention to your who you imagine your target audience is, your clients, your customers. Who are they? What do they want? And that's where you're gathering the data, and um, you're really diving into that. And it's very important to me. And I was in Voices, we served young people ages 14 to 24, because that is how, um, that is actually the time in a human's life when their brain is developing. That adolescence, it actually does go through 24, some say 25, 26. um, so it was very important to us to serve that age range.
Mhm.
And there's nothing like working with teenagers for 10 years to really understand that respect and collegiality n- is where it's at, not
Mhm.
top down. No matter how much experience I had as a writer or any of the other people on staff as writers, photographers, videographers, etc., it was about, we're in this together. We're creating a book together. We're creating a newspaper together. We're creating a video together. We are a publication staff. So I'm always advocating for that horizontal,
Mhm.
um, and because the top down approach does not work. Um, and after pre-award program design, then you have, where you're actually out there, looking for the fundraising, looking for the awards. I like to say there's nothing like a deadline to really say. Carolyn is, I got a big smile from Carolyn on that one because she knows, um, where you put all those program elements together, for different funders. Each funder has a different take. Part of the trick in that is, how do we, you don't want the funder, you don't want to rely on the funder to say, oh yeah, we'll do it like that, because the funder wants that. Funders are, speaking of collegiality, they're our colleagues too, and it's really important to say, this, our program doesn't fit with what the funder wants, and finding that fit and taking the time to find that fit is really important. So you're not just changing your program for every funder. You're never going to be able to implement that. Um, then the next phase is, post award. A lot of that is how are you bringing the right staff together? What's happening day to day? How are things being prioritized? And how are things being measured? You can't find yourself in the middle of the project and go, oh, I think we have to measure this and that and the other. Uh, it's really important to establish baselines, to have a consistent cadence of measuring and evaluating, and never forgetting. I'm also a really big advocate for this qualitative, where you're asking people, you're running little focus groups, you're doing interviews, especially with your participants, your colleague participants. Um, how are they feeling? How do they think things could be improved? Um, and then you are reporting out, and you're reporting out program outcomes, outputs, and you're also reporting out and invoicing. It's really important that the financial staff you're working with, the evaluation staff you're working with, that everybody is on the same page for what this program is for and how we're doing it and which grant pays for what. So nothing is a surprise, because just running the program with your colleague participants is enough, right? That's a lot. So folding in those other things and really thinking how that's just part of what you do every day, every week, every month. No surprises. And then at the end, some kind of it was really important in Voices. We always had a big celebration. We invited everyone, family, friends, um, partnerships, sponsors, funders. We recorded it. Um, if we were doing it today, we'd live stream it. It's really important to celebrate. Celebrations are key. They really bring people together. It's really emotional and impactful. We were talking about impacts earlier. One of the biggest impacts is for family and friends of our colleague participants to see how their loved ones grew in the program. It's kind of like a graduation, if you will. It's really those rituals, those moments are really important. And then at the very end, audit, and not just financial audits, but program audits. What
Mhm.
did we learn? This is something I've been preaching. I preached it at Pima County all the time. I preach it as a consultant. Don't just measure what the funders want you to measure. Measure what you, the organization, want to measure. What's at the heart of your organization, and make sure you're measuring that at the end too, and then bringing everyone together to reflect, very much in the spirit of a learning organization. How can we do this better next time? And I'm a big advocate for retreats at the end for staff, to really look at what all the evaluation told us and how we can do it better next time.
That's fabulous. You really bring in the why, the what, the how, and sounds like you have lots of whens and whos also participating in that. So you're really, again, multifaceted. Carolyn, I think you have an additional question for RK related to this.
Well, and RK, you've kind of touched on this, and it's you've been talking about the ecosystem that surrounds grant writing and the both the recipient of the grant, the organization, and the funder themselves. Could you go a little deeper on how the work you've done is part of our larger human development ecosystem?
I'm really glad you asked that, because Tony Sims, the CEO of Compass Affordable Housing, I love his emphasis on the human development continuum. Um, I'm going to just simplify it into chunks. There's the physical or physiological um, aspect of human development. You know, uh, where are you living? Do you have enough food? Do you have health care? Your health and your wellness, right? Um, And then the next one, and these two overlap in my mind, but it's cognitive development. How are you learning? Are you being stimulated? Are you learning and growing in terms of knowledge, skills, and abilities that can be applied, as a citizen, as your own person, but also in the workplace? And then psychosocial relationships. Do you know how to build positive relationships? Do you know what a healthy relationship is? Do you know how to build trust with people? But, first you have to have the basics of, are you physically okay? Do you have access to medicine? Do you have behavioral health needs? Let's stabilize you as a physical human first. But then the next step for me, and again, going back to the teenagers and me in my 30s running voices here in Tucson, and um, that's where I was really formed as a human development nonprofit professional. I really think of it as a vocation, a calling. Um, Trust, building trust in a program is so important. And I think that's so important in human development. Um, there are lots of nonprofits in Tucson. There are, I think the most telling thing for me about who's really succeeding as a nonprofit in our community is when you hear and see that people vote with their feet. You know, do they keep coming back to that nonprofit when they are in need? Um, Also, people who want to donate to that nonprofit. People are voting with their feet and their pocketbook in a lot of ways. And that's their way of saying, I trust this organization. I trust that they're doing the right thing. I trust that they have an impact. And I trust that if I am a participant here and asking for help, I'll be treated with respect and dignity. I won't encounter shame or being punished because I got T-boned by life. It happens to all of us. So trust is really important to me, and trust is at kind of, to me, it's like if you think of the Venn diagram of human development. I mean, you can think of it as a continuum. You can also frame it as a Venn diagram, and I think at the physical needs, cognitive needs, psychosocial, right in the heart where everything overlaps, I would argue is trust. You can't do any of those things. You can't serve any of those needs if people don't trust you. So
Well put.
that's super important to me.
Very well put. Thank you.
Very well put.
Annually, we give to local organizations who are running programs and making great strides in what we call the social determinants of health. It's incredible the work that they're doing, and we're just really proud to be a part of it.
And we're back for our final segment and want to mention that our podcast major sponsor is Tucson Osteopathic Medical Foundation. So, RK, you just did a wonderful job of walking us through how the agency, your firm, works with solving specific issues in Southern Arizona and how that relates to Southern Arizona's human development ecosystem. Certainly, trust being a big part of that. And you really walked us through the different facets of that. I wonder now if you share with our guests and viewers how they, as Southern Arizona residents, workers, community members who may be in need of services, of your services, can participate in the different actions and initiatives that you lead.
Um, well, I kind of want to yes, I have a consultancy. Yes, it's called Grants Arc. Uh, and what I would say is that there are so many needs out there right now. I really want to, at this, if it's okay, I would really like to promote Compass right now. Um, Compass is one of my clients, Compass Affordable Housing, and I think Compass is doing some really, really important work in the community. And there's so many people who are in need right now. So I think, yes, I'm a consultant. I can help a lot of organizations. But there are a lot of people who are looking for housing right now. And one of those, when we think about, we've been talking about continuums, right? Human development continuums. We've been talking about cycles like the grants life cycle. There's also a continuum of housing. A lot of times when we talk about the need for housing, we think of shelters, right? We think of homeless shelters. The other thing that people think about a lot is Habitat for Humanity. Those are two very familiar ways to talk about housing when we talk about housing policy and affordability crisis in the country. But what I think Compass is really drawing attention to is there's all sorts of different types of steps and progressions that somebody needs to be supported in to get from a shelter all the way to owning a house, like with Habitat or through um, uh, some other process to own their own home. There's a lot in the middle.
There's a lot in the middle.
A lot in the middle. And so one of the new emphases at Compass Affordable Housing that I'm very excited about is transitional housing. And Tony Sims, the CEO of Compass Affordable Housing, is promoting and envisioning this idea that there's levels. After shelter, there should be something called bronze transitional housing, then silver, then gold, then platinum, before people start to graduate, if you will, to
Into
home
home
ownership.
ownership. Mhm.
Yeah. And so I'm really excited about the bronze and the silver aspects of that, because people come into shelter from living on the street or in their cars or what we call couch surfing. People are really broken. People are broken, not necessarily their spirit is broken, their confidence is broken. And I've seen this a lot in my human services nonprofit work over the last 30 years. It's not that people don't have talent and ingenuity and smarts. I believe everybody is brilliant. But uh, people need to be supported. And one of the coolest things about bronze and silver is coming up with ways that we can have shared housing to get shared housing roommates, housemates in apartments and houses to keep the cost down, but also to create groups, cohorts, if you will, where people are supporting each other and saying, I'm also looking for a job. Today I had a really hard day. I also had to go to 3 different pharmacies today because they said I didn't have the right paperwork. And just sharing that and supporting each other. I think that's part of what's happening in the transitional housing, especially at the bronze and silver level.
Mhm.
And I'm really excited to see how that plays out.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm just going to do a little plug for you in the sense that in your role as now consultant with the vast experience that you've had, you definitely have earned the trust. And it will be interesting to see the way that other organizations, your other clientele, or maybe other constituencies that they serve, will come to you to point them in the right direction amidst the ecosystem. So
Thank
thank you so much for sharing with that. Carolyn, I think we've had another wonderful podcast episode here, don't you?
I am really excited with the way the conversations went today. RK, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and the impact that you've had in not only rising up the Voices organization and that of our youth, but also of taking that experience and applying it to help so many other organizations and community partners here in Southern Arizona achieve their success. I don't know where we'd be without you.
you.
We thank you for tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing y'all next week. Every Friday, our new podcast drops. You can always learn more at www.compassaffordablehousinginc.org. www.compassaffordablehousing.org.